Boom, boom, boom.
This is James Rosebush, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
All right, we got a little bit of technical stuff going on in the background on my side, so we're going to rock the regular camera. But I always appreciate you coming on. It's interesting. I guess, can we start off with talking about our dearly departed friend, Robert Hunter? He was, we all became friends because of this show. And it's just, I love the story of how you guys were able to connect. I love the fact that I had you on independently for him. And I was like, oh, there's this wonderful guy you should know. And you're like, that guy's my across the street neighbor. What a great thing. So I just wanted to take a moment to just appreciate Dr. Ambassador Robert Hunter's life and the friendship that we all had together.
Yes, exactly. And his service, his funeral service is on Tuesday, the 10th. And I'm going to speak, I'm just going to say a little bit about how you joined us together and how everything changed, because you know the story that when you I'd done a number of your shows, and you said to me one day, hey, James, I think it might be good to add a third person. What do you think of that? And I said, oh, great. That's fine with me. And then after another segment we had, you called me back and you said, maybe you didn't even introduce. Yes, you did. You said to me, I don't think you know this person, but anyway, I said, well, what is his name? And then you told me the name, and I didn't say anything, as you remember. I said nothing.
Yeah.
So, but just for the sake of, being in this segment, this was a gentleman who truly hated me. And he said it very often to my face. And it was a very unpleasant experience, but he lived across the street from me. And I didn't ever say anything to him that was, I let him just vent the way he wanted to. And then when we came on your great show, he discovered that 90% of everything we talked about, we were completely in sync on that. And so his hate turned into love. And he became like, he wanted to talk to me every day. He would talk to me out in the streets. He talked to me when he's driving his car past my house. And so I think it's quite an example of how we need to be treating each other, and that perhaps his views, which he thought did not sync with mine, caused him to be somewhat antagonistic. Well, that all was dispelled by you, because you did a great job of bringing us together. And as I say, we pretty much agreed on everything that you asked us to talk about, which was serious matters. And I think it's just a lovely story to recount and to share with people. So I'm going to do that at the funeral if I'm called to be able to stand up and speak.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's neat because of the coincidental thing. I didn't realize how much animus there was. I mean, I knew you guys were contrary in terms of, political lean, but yeah, you get to walking and talking, and all of a sudden you realize we might disagree on the path to get there, but we both want the same outcome. And even things when you're that far apart on, you can say, well, let's try your path, or maybe you try your path with a little bit of this in there, and that might help us both out. And then now you're negotiating from a point of view of commonality instead of adversarially.
Well, I think more than anything else, we agreed on strategy that was very important to him and the work that he had done. And there was mutual respect for that. But also more than that, because you're not aware of this, after the session or two that we were on together, maybe three, I would say that there were times that, we weren't on air, and he would come out in the middle of the street and say, okay, I want to know what you think about this. And what do you think about when the president did this? And, where do you think we should be there doing this? And again, we were like, I would say 95% agreement.
Yeah. Was the 5 or 10%, was it worth being hostile over at all? I mean, was that?
Oh, no, there was no hostility. That was discussion. So there were a few things, I think, that probably there were more things that were foreign policy issues that are being practiced perhaps today. I mean, he passed away about a month ago now. And so, you know, but I'd been speaking to him right along. So he went to have lunch with a friend of his. And when he got out, went in his car, closed the car door, and bang, he was gone.
Yeah. 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 It's what I'm glad we got a chance to chat about Dr. Robert Hunter. I met him at a conference where he was the guest of honor for a NATO turns 70 celebration. So he was a speaker. And I love these things where someone who's an ambassador, a PhD, a guy who's helping to negotiate the Dayton Peace Accords is talking to the guy who was on the ground, putting that vision to work. And so my buddy Rich and I gave a talk on the US's general disregard for religion in state affairs, even though we're in places like Iraq where they have Allah Akbar on the flag, you know, or we're working in the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan at the time. And so you can't just ignore religion. And he thought that was just this wonderful example. And we gave this example of a place called Salman Pak. Salman the Farsi was a very good friend. He was Muhammad's barber. And so his shrine, along with two other shrines, are in this place called Salman Pak. And it's a very important place in Iraq and also to the Islamic world. And people migrate there to have their boys' first haircut because, you know, whatever, all these things. And so religion was a really powerful thing. And he loved it. And for whatever reason, all of that stew turned into a great blend where he and I could have these complex conversations. We brought you in to make it even more complex. But again, like we found this common ground and understanding certain things. And Robert was great at saying, well, before that happened, this happened. Before that happened, this happened. And so there's this whole chain of events that brought us to this point. And it changes how you see a problem. I might have him on the show and say, bam, and then he would talk for an hour, you know, because he had so much knowledge. I didn't want to interrupt. And so a wonderful man, a wonderful person. And I guess unless there's anything else you want to say about Robert right now, we should move into the next part of our conversation. But I definitely want to give you a chance to say anything else about Robert before we do that.
Oh, let's do it. No, I think we've covered Robert.
Oh, okay, good. Things are crazy out there in the big world. You've worked with President Reagan. You worked with his wife. You've worked with a lot of folks in a lot of other capacities. How are we sitting right now? Like when you see things, are you uncomfortable, comfortable? What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts are that the world is basically in chaos, and you can see the impact with the way oil is dramatically going up, and you see the number of people that have just left their jobs or been taken out. That was not a good number for today at all. And you see also the issue of will we have enough war material? Will we have enough energy? People, I would say, in my heart goes out to these people that are, some people are terribly fearful of what is happening, what the U.S. is doing, and was it the right way to do what has just been done? And I think that I understand a lot of this, a tremendous, I would say, a high percentage of individual concern is politically driven, because I think that the United States, I think that the White House is doing precisely the right thing after we've gone through three presidents who basically paid Iran to preserve their preparation for war and their constant, and I mean constant, threat against wiping out Israel, hitting the United States. This is a very common thing for them to do. And the idea of allowing Iran to have the capability to use nuclear force was an unthinkable prospect in my point of view. So to me, they were asking for what the current administration has done, and which is not, by the way, though people use the word war, this is not really a war. It's basically a takedown of an administration that not only threatened the Western world, but also was an enormous threat to its own people, and thought nothing of murdering many numbers of Iranian people, and the idea that they would be allowed to continue to parade their animosity to the rest of the world in a very threatening way was something that was not tolerable. And so finally, we have a president who is willing to address what needed to be addressed all along, because the idea that the billions of dollars that in the past three administrations had been bestowed on Iran was utterly and completely out of consideration for anyone who just had any kind of reasonable view of this. Now, of course, what has happened, I think there's some things have happened in the past few days that were not expected by this administration and probably should have been addressed, and that is what Iran has been doing. I would call it playfully, not tremendously, certainly threatening, but not to an enormous extent, other countries in the Middle East. So I think that the U.S. strategy, I think the strategy that the White House has is to pull together, and I think they've been doing this now for quite some time, Middle Eastern countries to become even better allies and to work through the complexities of how, in particular, countries that are not in tune with our foreign policy in the Middle East, I think need to become a part of it. And you see that I believe that the right steps were taken. I do not believe that, and I don't support a lengthy kind of militarization toward Iran. But in speaking and explaining what the action was that the White House was taking, they made it very clear that they were not going to war with Iran, but that they were going to work on and have affected change in the control of the country and its government, which its people, I would say, very much, by and large, sought themselves. So I think that was the objective. I think it can be messy. I think it can be scary. I think it can obviously cause a lot of disruption, particularly in the Middle East, having to do with not just oil, but other resources. And where the military is, you see also today that Putin has gone ahead to advise and to support the regime in Iran. I think that should be no surprise, but it's certainly a confirmation of where he stands and the way we should be handling him. So I think it's eyes open. I think it's chaotic. I think it's political. I think there is obviously opposition on the opposition side in the U.S. And I can understand that that's their goal, to be political, and that's why we have a two-party system, at least in this country. And I think that's important. I respect both views, but for myself, I've been waiting for a president who would stand up against a terrorist nation like Iran, who would consistently say that they want to blow up Israel, they want to blow up the United States, they want to do nothing but threaten us, and would not allow the what we insisted that they do. However, previous administrations have not been consistent about this and have continued to provide them with the financial and other resources that they need to continue their development of nuclear warheads. That is not a possibility. Now, what do we do? Because these previous administrations have had negotiations with Iran. Well, it hasn't happened. So do we sit by? It's very important that not only is America thought of as the most important leadership in the world, but also that it is respected when we think that the time is right to set things straight. And I believe that the President of the United States speaks for and should demand in situations like this that there's either a stand down, there's a resolution, there's an agreement, or there has to be action taken, because America is the strongest nation in the world, and it will continue to be, and it has been for a long time. And it was the president that I worked for would say that America was put here to bring freedom to not only its own citizens, but to the rest of the world. And everywhere I went with President Reagan, I remember going into China, for example, and to walk with him among the farmers that had hoes basically, and they were working to plant vegetables, fruits and vegetables. And when they saw President Reagan, they said all they wanted to do was talk to him about what freedom felt like. And when we left, they called out to him, "Freedom man, freedom man." That was only their doing. That wasn't anything that was projected or planned. But I'll never, ever forget standing next to President Reagan and these farmers that were obviously, being very poorly paid, but they were doing their work. But they called out to President Reagan, "Freedom man." This is what we need to represent as the American people in our country to the rest of the world, is to support free democratic way of government and protection for the individual. That is what Ronald Reagan always sought. And I think that's what any American president should seek. Not only, first of all, to protect our own citizens, but at the same time, to really be champions of freedom around the world.
Yeah. All of that is fantastic. There's a lot of, if we were to have told ourselves back in the late 70s that, hey, Iran is going to be this player, it's going to destabilize the entire region, it's got to be over 100,000 people, their own people, other people. Yeah. And they're going to conspire against other nations and just destabilize the Middle East. That's what that regime is going to do. And whoever the supreme leader of the country is going to openly call for the nuking of America and the nuking of Israel. We would say, oh, come on. No way that would happen. But we've kind of frog boiled ourselves into this place where we were afraid to act. And quite often on social media, who the hell cares? But you would see like, oh no, the Iranians are flying the black flag of death or whatever. And folks would actually get into a bit of an amplified state because of these things. But it was a lot of it was silly.
If that was their objective and they communicated it to us and the rest of the world all the time, why would we give them more money to support their system and their regime? I don't understand that. I've never understood that. So why would you allow, if you know that you have an enemy next door and they're going to make every attempt to hurt you, wouldn't you do something to protect yourself or to bring them down or make sure that they don't have the capacity? To me, that's the responsibility of a president, to protect the American people. Now, that is what I understand to be their mission. They've said time and time again, we're not here for regime change. We're not here to take over the country, but we're here basically to protect the American people.
Yeah.
Why would you not want to do that? That's your job.
Yeah. Right. And protecting Americans, protecting our allies in the region. And one of the things that I saw and was excited for was, we started this whole thing and I'm going to be pretty simplistic here, but we made a good relationship with Jordan, taught and worked with and partnered with their military to make them a capable military to where like they can defend themselves pretty well. And same thing with Israel. We've worked with those guys, partnered with them, and then we've branched out, and now we have all of these other Arab countries that are willing to partner potentially with Israel, potentially in business. They can defend themselves from nefarious actors like Iran and their rockets. A lot of that stuff has worked, but we just haven't been able to sort of until now sort out and say, hey, enough with your thuggery, enough with your black market deals, enough with all of you murderers that you guys have committed internally and externally. I just don't understand why it took so long.
Well, all you have to do is look at the past several White House, strategists and presidents. It's inconceivable to me that you could send negotiators to Iran and have them come back and carry a gift of money over to the. I don't understand it at all. And the idea that we were just giving them access to capital so that they could continue to have heat during the winter or something like that. I mean, it was completely, it didn't make any sense to me. And anyone who has any kind of reasoning or understands anything about foreign policy, I don't understand why they wouldn't, why they would not object to that. So certainly now this is an objection to the foreign policy that previous administrations have had. And I think this is why there's support for what the current president has done.
We hear a lot of the things, a lot of the objections, and objections are warranted, right? Because it's war or something damn close to war. We hear about the lack of material, which we've kind of mentioned earlier. We hear about the draft coming and all these standard things that we talk about. But what are the legitimate critiques of what the Trump administration is doing? Where do you see potential trouble? Like, I know that we could say, hey, we're only here to kill people and break things. Then we're leaving. We're going to leave it all to you. But we don't want an uncontrolled outcome on the back end. We're going to send more assets here, whether it's business people. Now you got to bring military to protect them, or allow them to hire security. There's a lot of problems in getting from where we are now to a stable, prosperous, and
well,
safe
right
Iran.
there.
Yeah.
Right there, what you're saying is what I'm feeling more acutely about. So we're very, and this is, I think that things that we pulled off in Venezuela and in Iran have been absolutely spot on, remarkable for a very small loss of life in the case of Iran. And the way it's all been managed I think is certainly earns top level brilliant. But now I'm not sure that they planned enough with enough detail. And I'm sure that they were playing war games and thinking about every different aspect, what could happen, what didn't happen, all this sort of thing. I'm absolutely sure that the Pentagon was very much, and the CIA very, very much involved with that. And I don't doubt that for a minute. However, I would say it is right now, anyway, somewhat messy, and that I'm sure that they're aware of this, and that they're making every effort to, I would say, migrate it in the right direction, so that there will be a minimum loss of life, and that as soon as possible, the regime in Iran will pass to, hopefully, to the people for them to decide who is going to rule them, rather than being told who the next ruler was going to be. That, because if that's the way the country is going, then I think there will be continual, at least animus, and apparently, the son of the last ruler being in place, what kind of government, what kind of life does that offer for the people of Iran? They're going to have to decide, and they're going to have to be involved in this obviously as much. So I think that right now we're in a, that's why I began my remarks by saying we're in a chaotic period, which is, I think, somewhat true, because now it's not as, the target has been taken, and that was done very well. Now we have I think one of the things that's been a big surprise is some of the, not terribly destructive, but some of the things that the Iran military has done to other Middle East countries. So, and I think there are 4 or 5 of them that have been affected by this. I think that was a surprise. I think that that sort of woke people up a little bit. Also, in when I say woke them up, in terms of what they did not expect would happen. So I think that, but these are things that always happen in situations where there's change. People don't like change. Politicians don't like change. People generally don't like change. They want to know what's going to happen when, and they want to have the confidence. It's just like our economy right now. I think that these events have caused a lot of concern about employment, about where we're going in terms of the American people, the jobs that they need, to also to bring down more inflation, and to address America's needs as well. But America needs to have relationships with countries that are going to be, even if they don't agree with our way of life, to be in a position to negotiate on a friendly basis with us.
Right.
You have the same thing happening. You have a very similar thing happening in Ukraine. So,
yes.
I expected that in the first 6 hours of our new president being in office, that he would have shut that down, because I think he could have. I don't know, and I don't understand, though I'm very close with the Ukrainians. I have a high opinion of them, very close to the Ukrainian ambassador. And I expected and hoped that there would be a quick end to that. And even if there has to be some negotiations, that would be addressed. I think if that had been actually, and I don't understand why it hasn't, and I think that probably if we didn't have that theater of war going on, I think what's happening in the Middle East might have been a little bit more acceptable to those that oppose it.
Yeah. Well, you said a mouthful, though, when you said, we don't like change. And when there's, even if it's going to be for the better, if you told me a year and a half ago that we would have Iran looking at potentially going in a completely different direction, hopefully better, how could it get worse? If we had Venezuela back up on its feet and hopefully running in a good direction, if we had Cuba kind of coming back to the middle and being able to be a regular country, I mean, I would take all of those wins, and reducing China's influence in the Western Hemisphere. I think all of these things are good things. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the foreign policy. There's a lot of things to not like about Donald Trump. He's impetuous. He wastes his time on things he doesn't need to waste his time on, and the president's time is finite. But some of the domestic policy stuff has caused a lot of problems. Some of that is political, but some of it's fair critique. And so we're struggling with these things. All of this turns into this tumult where if you're inclined to be uncomfortable about Donald Trump or his presidency, you're going to be confirmed that this is not going well. And if you're inclined the other direction, you think, hey, everything's peachy. I'm sort of in the middle where I'm like, hey, I want these wins to be wins, but I also know how hard it is to get these things and keep them right and going in the right direction. We, in effect, establish a democracy in Iraq. Well, go find me the Iraqi who's happy with where they're at, and find out if we don't like it either. If all this Iranian influence, I'm going to have an Iraqi guy coming on who's going to talk about that very thing next week. So this is hard stuff to get right. What how would you put the foreign policy and the domestic policy right now currently where we're at? Are you optimistic? Are you sort of in the middle? Do you want to give a letter grade? I don't know. Help me understand what you think about it.
So I do want to share this with your listeners because it's something I had to learn. So
Mm,
when I was asked to give a speech, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, I guess it was, and they asked me to speak about Venezuela, and I said, Why do you want me to speak about Venezuela? That's all tied up, and everyone knows exactly about Venezuela, what happened, what went down, so forth. But I think I need to understand and to help you understand, this is my audience, that we have migrated again away from the Western alliance. Now, this is something that people need to understand. And it was something that was concerning to me. When I talked about chaos, I think this is another feature. Okay. You think about this. So, a great number, though not all by any stretch of the imagination, of families who live in the United States, their families migrated, came from generations ago, European countries. My family came from France, for example. Other
mhm.
families came from Poland, lots of all over Western Europe. We basically our strongest alliance had been for many, many, many years the West. So we had this relationship that was, I would say, in the case, for example, of President Reagan, the first thing that we did is we went on a trip to 8 countries in Western Europe
Okay.
to declare and to confirm our inevitable relationship with Western Europe. Now, it seems in this administration, and it took me quite a while to understand what was going on here, and I wasn't terribly happy about it. I'm fully acknowledging the fact that Germany, which is probably the worst um, uh, at not adhering to what the U.S. was looking for from them, which was military development and also to protect themselves and to migrate away from buying, for example, energy from Russia and other bad actors. So I had to figure this out. And basically, I think this administration is not, although Marco Rubio gave a magnificent speech in Germany, and I
Yeah.
think this helped to quell a little bit of the concern and fear and distance that Western European countries feel about our relationship right now. I think he did a magnificent job. And I think we need to continue to have and to support our relationship with Western Europe. However, I do not think that it is a primary objective. I believe that this administration is interested in our Monroe Doctrine countries within our hemisphere for good reason, to protect the American people and to work on and develop relationships with those countries that really need help as well in terms of democratic systems, getting rid of cartels and bad actors. I mean, we have plenty of work to do within our own hemisphere. So I think that then, and at the same time, you have Western European countries that have caused their own problems. They have caused their own problems, and they haven't done enough work on immigration, for example. They haven't done enough on industrialization. They haven't done enough to support their people with all kinds of new development that basically make them and put them in a position of solidarity with capitalism and basically to provide a good living for and standard of economics in their own countries. So I think that this administration has migrated away and said, well, we can't take care of the whole world, or we can't have productive alliances with the whole world. Now we're going to focus on, and I haven't heard this said, but I had to do a lot of research on this, and I did talk to a number of people at the Pentagon about this. So the migration to the Middle East and to countries in our hemisphere to sort out. There are a lot of issues to sort out. This goes back to my word chaos. Chaos can be something that is good and useful and has a good outcome. But while it's chaotic, it is fear engendering on the part of people, and gives a lot of petroleum to, not to use a word that's associated with something else, but gives a lot of opportunity for fear on the part of, and opportunity to, I would say, play the opposition hand with people who are not in control of the White House. So you see what I'm saying there? That the migration away from the Western alliance, which was always the United States and Western Europe. Now, also, as everyone knows, you'd had to be in, pre-kindergarten not to know this, that they were not at all supporting NATO the way that they were supposed to. And this administration has hyped that up, and there's much more of a commitment to NATO. I think that chaos is probably the way that in some parts of this administration you see the way it works, because each day, I think, I'm not working in the White House anymore, but the way each day in any White House could be unexpected. It could be because you have, in particular, a lot of watchdogs out there. And by that, I mean in the media, you have to pay a lot of attention to what it is you're doing, the confidence or lack of confidence that you have, and your ability to tell the story.
Yeah. If President Trump said, "Hey, James, we need your help," where would you want to help this White House? How would you fit in? You can pick your job. You're like, I know exactly what to do. And I know you know what to do. So where would you apply your efforts?
Improve your ability to communicate with the American people what it is you're doing and why it's in their best interest. Now, I think there were hints of that at the State of the Union, but not enough. And this is something that, if you could only get out there and just say a few paragraphs, I want the American people to understand what it is we're doing on your behalf. And this is what it is. Bang, 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 bang. A dozen different statements and explaining why. This is something that I feel, obviously, the president I work for was called the great communicator. And even so, to be able to, I think the White House has a superlative office of, communications, where they do a wonderful job of putting out fires and also answering a lot of questions of the media. But I think this is a time when the White House would benefit from more presidential, maybe talks from the Oval Office, ways where, I would just start this way, and I would say, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my friends. I know that there are a lot of people who would like to understand better what we're doing on behalf of the American people. And this is what I'm going to share with you tonight. These are our objectives. This is not, I'm not talking about throwing, things that are obviously kept under wraps, strategies that are not ready to be discussed, but have enough respect for the American people to tell them and to communicate and to say, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. I think would go a long way. Now, it would do two things. It would give the conservative media more meat to say, okay, this is what they're doing. And I think it would also calm the waters of the media who do not support this administration. I don't understand why that can't take place. To me, you ask me, I would say, whenever there was anything that was tremendously concerned to the American people, President Reagan, you saw him many, many times in the Oval Office, just saying, because he had that much respect for the American people, and the fact that he was basically the servant leader. He was doing what the Americans largely wanted him to do, but they needed to hear why he was doing it. And they're not, and I'm not saying that there, as again, there are many times that it's not appropriate or it's not timely to share a lot of intelligence with the American people. But in terms of where we're going, I think it would go a long way to have the president in a giving and delivering a well-prepared speech that would answer a lot of people and would not satisfy everyone, because we have different points of view politically. I think it would go a long way, and I think that some of that was done at his major speech recently, but I think not enough.
When I try to watch just about everything President Trump says. Maybe not some of the gaggles, but I try to, because I'm concerned about how it's going and what he's presenting. And he repeats a lot of the same things over and over and over. And that must be by design. It's not by accident, but it becomes repetitive. And it seems to me, and again, I don't work there, so, Pete, shut up. But you only have so many words you get to say to the American people. And if you're still talking about how the hottest country in the world over and over again, the people who believe you about that now. And the people that don't. So how do you unite? How do you lead? And this is where I think your former boss was a better leader, better communicator. Different system. Obviously, the press is primarily against Donald Trump, but also he creates an environment where the press is against Donald Trump. And so they have this war that's outside of his presidential goals and outcomes. And so that's a discursive when he needs to figure out how to gather at least the middle, if they're possible to gather them. But I don't see him speaking to me, and I'm squarely in the middle. There's things I'm left on, things I'm like, well, all Americans. But when you make comments about the Rob Reiner thing, this is an easy thing to not do, just avoid. And it's just it's beyond crass. It's damaging to his credibility. And this is a person who is damaged in terms of credibility. So that's my main critique, is the leadership part. And when he does communicate, I love that the administration is out. They're on podcasts, they're on the news. I love watching Scott Bessent talk about where we're going and what we're doing. I think he's doing a great job. And I'll take more of all that from Secretary of Energy, Secretary Reed. All these guys are talking all the time. That's great. But I just don't know that the president's messaging is working in a way that makes sense. And even when he does say things, because he is so bombastic and he stretches the truth as far as he possibly can, when he says things like, I've stopped 7, maybe 8 wars, that appears to be legitimate, but only to a certain portion of the nation. And no matter how many times he says that, they're just going to reject that reality. That is a hard problem to solve, especially when you have the disruptor in chief up there disrupting his own success. How did I do?
Well, yeah. So none of that is going to change.
Right.
So,
okay.
But what we could suggest, and if anyone is in the White House listening to this, I would say there is a speechwriting office.
Yeah.
And it may be also complicated. However, they're speechwriters there for a purpose. And if I believe the most important thing they could do right now is to have speeches written that the president would accept and deliver. That's all we're looking for. You're not going to change the person. You're not going.
Right.
None of that is going to happen. But there is a speech writing office, and there are speech writers in there, and they're waiting. I think that. I mean, the example of Marco Rubio. That was a speech that was crafted by speechwriters, but it fit his demeanor. Now and it was a very, I would say, people bought it because they knew that it was a part of his soul, and his delivery was excellent. Now, in this case, Marco Rubio and the president are different. They have different characters, but our president is working very hard on the behalf of the American people. I can be very comfortable saying that I believe that. The communication is, I believe, an element of respect for the American people. And I believe that the American people deserve to hear more about what the White House strategy is and expectations, and in a very plain way. There are things that the American people need to know, and it needs to be delivered by their president.
Yeah, that's great stuff, man. I appreciate you taking the time to say that. Yeah, because look, it's his show. He gets to run it how he wants. He is the everything in chief, and he's definitely pushing the limits of that. All of this stuff, though, pushes us out of our comfort zone. He's a reform candidate, so he's changing what was done the last time. That makes us uncomfortable. There's a lot of things where we're already going to be unseated and unsettled, and that uses a lot of political capital. If Pete, the non-political scientist, can say anything about that. And I wonder, I wonder what's coming when we have our elections here in a few months, and if this will be the end of the road. They certainly have done a lot. Do you think they can maintain this pace? Let's say that, the House and the Senate split or whatever. Can they maintain this pace of work that they've been putting in this first 2 years?
You mean if the Republicans lose
Yeah, if they
control?
lose either side, the Senate or the House, can they maintain
Well, it's going to be
yeah.
it's going to be more difficult. Obviously, it would have to be more nuanced, but it's just basically, I would think that the White House is going to continue doing what it wants to do. It's
Right.
just when it comes to passing laws that the power of which is the power of Congress to do, it will be more complex. We saw this in the Reagan administration as well. And at that time, I would say, Reagan was a very different kind of person, and it was always noted that he and Tip O'Neill were good friends after 5 p.m., as he would always say. Right. And I think there's a lot to say for that. But in this case, this is a whole different presidency, and I think it fits the needs of the world right now, that we must support our country, and we must recognize that our country is setting an example for and saving the rest of the world against itself, but also protecting the American people. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in the midterms, but I can say that I think that it won't tremendously affect the White House operation. I think they will go ahead and do what they think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, you've worked with the First Lady in the past capacity. Was Chief of Staff? Is that right? Is that what you were? Yes. For Nancy Reagan? Yeah.
Right.
What are your thoughts on this First Lady? Obviously, there's people that hate her because of the guy she's married to, but set all that stuff aside because that's nonsense. What are your thoughts on how she's approaching the job?
That is, I have to tell you, that is a mystery to me.
Okay.
I think obviously she's I believe, I don't know. I have, I consider myself a friend of her chief of staff, and we've had lunch together, and I have very high opinion of her. She's doing a terrific job. I think that the First Lady is very smart. I think she represents our country very well, and I think she works hard to support the president, and the things that she does very well. Mm-hmm. There again, there is I would say, I don't know if it's naive or lack of interest or lack of political acumen. I would go back to this issue that I just mentioned to you, that I believe, they are the two biggest features in the White House. I believe they need to communicate, both of them. So I would add her to this, that it would help to have a bit more of understanding about what her concerns are, what her issues are, and what her commitments are. Instead of like all of a sudden she's convening at the United Nations. Well, maybe that's a great idea. It might be, I took Nancy Reagan. She was the first speaker to make a speech at the General Assembly on drug abuse. And we took 40 first ladies from around the world with us. I mean, it was a spectacular event. But that was seen as, it wasn't like a surprise. Now, maybe I was asleep, but when I woke up and I saw that she was, convening at the United Nations, I thought, interesting, but there wasn't any explanation about like why. And maybe this is something that I missed. I would just say that we are constituents, we are taxpayers, we love our country. We always, we strive to, but don't always agree with presidential administrations, but we certainly strive to support them. I think that the American people could be benefited by understanding more. Now, maybe it's something that I just missed, because I'm sure that there was a press corps traveling with her, all that sort of thing. So maybe it was, as I say, maybe it was something I missed.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, and I'm not saying it was inappropriate. And I think she's a first lady to be proud of. But I think communication with the American people would be, again, it sounds like a record, but it was something that I had to learn, because remember this, when the first year that Nancy Reagan was in the White House, she barely left the White House, and her approval rating she was down at like the lowest 5 first ladies in American history. Now, this was, so when I was asked, and I very much, like, it was 3 months, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that job. No, I'm not doing that. I'm sticking only with the president, because that was my job, and that's what I love doing with him and all that sort of thing. And they kept saying to me, you have to be the chief of staff. And I said, the only way that I would accept that job is if I maintained my position with the president. And they said, fine, whatever. And this is interesting, because now all the chiefs of staff for the first lady are also commissioned officers to the president. So that was something that, I mean, I don't know how I got that idea. Well, basically because I didn't want to leave working for the president. So they said, fine, you can do both jobs at once. So, but that's proven to be good for the chiefs of staff for the first lady that followed me. I mean, I didn't think about it at the time. So you have, in Nancy Reagan's case, so when I got in there, this is the beginning of the second year, the person who was the chief of staff, he moved out. And I said, what we're going to do is I'm going to put you on the road. And she was like, okay, whatever. She didn't complain. I said, we're going to go like every day. We're going to travel this country. We're going to work on radical drug abuse. We're going to work on all these things. But you're going to be seen by and touched by and speak to the American people. You're not going to sit here. I mean, she wasn't sitting in the White House. She was working hard, but she wasn't getting out of the White House. So people didn't know. And then, so all of a sudden, so I would say after that first year, she went from the lowest 5 to among the top 5 of first ladies. Why? Because she was communicating with them. And they felt that she was like them. She wasn't just, this, important person on a pedestal. And I think these are all things that the American people look for. They want to, and in Reagan's case, Reagan was beloved by people on I went one time we were in Boston, and we were going to, we went into a bar, and definitely in the Democratic side of Boston, and people, everyone that was there, I guess it was sort of a surprise visit. They're like hugging him, and these are all workers in different areas and that sort of thing. But why did they like him? Because he liked them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
If
Well,
what a president really needs to do is show the American people some love.
Yeah. 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 And the
You know what I
first lady
mean?
can
Isn't
amplify
that
that.
whether you're CEO of a company or you're
Yeah.
CEO of a nation or your governor, your constituents, your employees, your customers, they want to know that you respect them, you love them, and you're doing for them the very best job you possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all of that. I'm a
It's
big
not,
believer in
it isn't just because you've been voted in or you've been hired to be a CEO of a company for whatever your skills or whatever. Or this isn't the way to operate. The way to operate is to, I'll never forget, and Reagan was like, oh man, he was 100% this way. I'll never forget, and you may see this. I'm sorry, I don't have my photographs here because we could put them up. One time I was asked by the Kennedys, okay, Kennedys are not Republican, right?
No.
So they came to my office, we sat around my office, and they asked me, Jim, could you arrange for, one of their big causes was probably still is, the Olympics. What's it called for the Olympics for
Special Olympics?
Yeah, is that what it's called? Yeah, I should know that.
Special Olympics,
Yeah, so guess what? We had a whole program on the outside of the White House on the South Lawn, and we set up tents and all this sort of thing. Well, this is what they did. The Olympians, they came over to the president and they wanted to hug him. And Secret Service doesn't, that's something that you don't touch the president of the United States. The president was like, no, it's fine, and he's hugging all these athletes like this.
Yeah.
Okay, now that wasn't done as a trick photograph.
Right.
That was done because the president felt affection for these people who strive so hard to do the best job they possibly can in competition. I will never forget that day. Never forget that day.
Yeah.
That is what, and I'm working on my fourth book called Where Have All the Leaders Gone? And It's not a political book. It's not a political book, but I'm telling you right now, it's a very hard book to write, because to talk about leadership globally, and I'm not talking about just political leadership. I'm talking about leadership at home, in the family, or in the schools, or in jobs, whatever. Leadership there's just like a vacuum right now of examples of great leadership. And so that's why I called it Where Have All the Leaders Gone? But the best kind of leadership is when there's no ego, but there's a commitment to the people who are working for you or under you or with you. They want to feel that they have from you a commitment to support them. The people who are doing the work need to feel that. And, we just don't have enough good examples of that.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in the things you're saying. If I was to be influential at all, or try to be influential, in an elected office, I would create as much understanding as I could from my day-to-day actions, and that I would have ride-alongs right along with the president, have one or two Americans come along every day so you can see the day and what it looks like. Sure, they can't go into every meeting or briefing, or they can. I'm the boss. Be like, you know what, this person's cleared for this. Sit down, Dave. Sit down, Tina, and we're gonna, do this thing every day. And I know that's probably impractical for the First Lady, but I'd rather have the First Lady meet with people that she can engage physically and talk to these folks for however long she has, as opposed to speaking to 5,000 people in an auditorium behind a microphone 100 yards away, for this person back. I want to let people know, because if you stack that up, a couple people doing that every day within the presidency, all of a sudden there's thousands of people that have had these hopefully wonderful interactions where at least they get to see that, hey, even if I don't agree politically with this person, I can see them working hard as hell on my behalf. I can see them fighting for me on my behalf. I can see this person eat a grilled cheese sandwich just like me. and create some familiarity and some understanding. That's Pete's philosophy, but I think we need more of that, not less.
Absolutely. I think in every quarter, I think that we need leadership, and we need leaders that understand and have so much respect and gratitude for the people who are working for them, and to show that, for example, if I were in the White House, what I would be doing is I'd be hosting a dinner for military members at least once a week. I would have, okay, Thursday night is dinner for, just bring in 20 military families with their kids and have dinner.
Yeah.
The military does so much with such little praise. I mean, they are willing to give up their lives, and it's absolutely intolerable to me that they should be treated as royalty.
Yeah. I mean, these folks, we've only lost 6, the last count, and only, right? But that's 6 incredible families that have, they have their warrior, and that's the cost of doing business, right? You want to go out and do these kind of things, then that's why we signed up. Hey, I don't want to take any more of your time. We've been at this for an hour. So thank you. Thank you. Everybody go check out James's work. There's a link down below. Is there anything you want to say in closing before we wrap up?
Hey, I'd like to say that I appreciate your show. Always happy to be on it. You have such a great attitude, and I can understand why your audience is as wide and broad as it is. It gives people an opportunity to share, I think, I'm sure with a lot of your guests, it's helpful to hear a point of view that can put them in a safer place.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great compliment, man. I appreciate it. Everybody, it's the Break It Down Show. You heard James. Sign up, subscribe down below. Go to breakitdownshow.com. You can go there and help out. If you want to produce a show, let me know. Just email me, Pete@breakitdownshow.com. James, I'll say goodbye to you in a second. Everybody else, I'll see you in a little bit.